Assalamu alaikum. Today we are going to tell you that why you should play Scythe. Scythe is a 1 to 5 player 4x game where you are going to go across the land, explore it, exploit it, and exterminate your enemies while trying to conquer this land. This game is set in the world of 1920s alternate fictional universe, alternate Earth, you can say, where Nikola Tesla has made these giant robots which are now supporting the Europa factions across the Eastern Europe to actually have more defensive capability, and each of these nations are racing towards that technology so that they cannot be left behind after the turn of events of World War I. And that's the desolated land who has enough of war, and that's where the game is set up. Now, in this game, even though there are going to be huge mechs, which are plastic miniatures that are going to be across the board, but you have to understand the mentality of this game, that this game is set in the world after the World War and not during the World War, which means people are fed up of war, which also means that the war mechanism of this game is going to be a minor component and not a major component. So based upon the map and the figures across the board, if you think you're going to get into a combat based game, then you will be wrong. This is more of an economic game where combat does exist, but it's more of a cold war. You're trying to intimidate your enemies, and maybe you will have one or two wars or combats in the game, and that's all you're going to face. But most people are going to be focused on the other economic based objectives, which are represented by a chart here on the top of the board. It's a huge board, and it is a double sided board. On the back side of the board there is even bigger hexes, which is similar to this one, but it's bigger, so you can combine two boards to have a gigantic map. But the default game, of course, your most of the people are going to just stick with this main side, which has the full map of Europa in one section. So coming back to the objectives, there are objectives on top, and there are different kind of objectives, like getting all the upgrades unlocked, all the your robots deployed, all your structures built. Different objectives are going to be there even for winning combat. And as soon as someone has completed all their 6 objectives, which is going to trigger the end of the game. Triggering the end of the game does not mean that whoever has completed the objectives immediately wins. He can still lose if the total points or the economic health of the nation he's controlling is not good as compared to any other players. So you are trying to actually get more points and complete more objectives, because the objectives are going to give you those points or economic health of your country anyway. So that's one of the main triggering actions, and as I mentioned, that there are going to be many different things that you can do to trigger them. So in each game it might not be the same path. In each game players can have different kind of mix of these 10 objectives, that which ones they are going to achieve to accomplish their victory. So if they had started with one path but now it's becoming more and more difficult, they might try to pivot and go to a different objectives to complete it. Now let's get back to the game, that how it is overall played, before we go into the other mechanisms of the game. On your turn, you are going to get these, each faction is going to get a player board, and there are multiple player boards available. Again, based on the factions that are available, there will be player boards for them. You can randomly give one faction to everyone, and also they are going to get a faction, this is the faction board and a player board, and the player board is going to have all your actions that you can do directly printed on it. And you're going to move a pawn on this action board, which is going to tell you which action you're going to take. And why that mechanism is important is that once you have taken an action, for example, if you take the most basic move action and move your characters across the map, then next turn, this is a reminder you already took the move turn, so now you have to do something else, so that the players don't keep spawning spamming the same action over and over. And that's a great mechanism to actually control the actions that you can do on your turn. So this player board is your main mechanism, that what actions you're going to do. So one of the primary actions, move, which lets you move 2 characters. So I can move one of my workers, one of my characters across the map of Europa. very basic. Then I can pay a coin, so there is going to be different kind of currencies in this game, beautiful tokens which you can upgrade to metal tokens as well. But the game tokens itself are beautiful and in my opinion don't need to be replaced unless you really like metal coins. So you can pay to increase your power. What power represents is you can consider it like your army, that the more army you have, the more undefeatable you will be when a combat occurs, and we will come to the combat later. So that's one of the actions. Then you can pay a coin to get any two kind of resources. There are these four different resources. There is metal, food, wood, and oil, and these will be used for various things, but you can pay a coin to get any of the two resources. And one of the actions is going to be to go for production. When you do production, these wooden meeples are going to represent your workers. So wherever this worker is on the board, on each of these hexes there is going to be a symbol, and the worker is going to work in that field to produce. So you can select, so for example right now I can only do production on two of my controlled hexes. So yeah, I can decide that for example I want to do production on this, so an oil will be produced, and I want to do production on this. Since I have two meeples on this in the forest, so they will cut two wood instead of one. So overall the production is for a hex, but it depends on the number of people that you are assigning there. And that's all the basic actions that you can do. Four actions on every player's board. These are going to be in different order, and that adds a little bit variability to how you are prioritizing your action. But that's not all, because on each of these boards at the bottom side there is going to be a secondary action available as well, which you can use, you can ignore, same as above. So for example, one of the actions is going to let you upgrade, and for these your resources are going to come to play. So you need to pay oil, and the cost will vary from player to player based on what board they have. So something might be cheaper for one player but costly for other. So but the game developers have really balanced it out by changing the rewards that you get. So something that might be costly will be more rewardful for that player as well. So you have to keep that in mind, that it is balanced even though the player boards are asymmetrical in cost. So you will be paying, for example, for the upgrade action, paying oil to upgrade. And once you upgrade, there are these tiny cubes that you get to remove from your board. And now what it has, for example, there are many options to upgrade. So for example, I told you that I can do production only on two axes. One of the things I can upgrade is that now, from now on, I can do production on three hexes rather than two hexes. And not only that, once this cube comes off, it goes into any of these bottom row cost sections of my choice to reduce the cost of any future upgrade actions. And that's another cool feature, that you are constantly upgrading or unlocking better abilities on your board. So another thing that you can do is pay the metal, these gray metal bars, to deploy one of your robots. And these robots, when they will go on a place where you have any of the workers. It will be choice where you want to deploy them. And once you have deployed, even on your player board, there are going to be certain special abilities that get unlocked once you have deployed the robot. So your faction has improved its civilization, improved its technology, and now you have new technologies being unlocked. So the player boards and the faction boards are really important, because you will be constantly looking at what should I upgrade and what sequence of actions should I do. First, if I do production, first if I move, take them to an important resource location, then if I go for the upgrade action or deploy action, then I will have enough resources. Chaining the actions in the proper sequence is going to be your main core of the game, where you will be thinking that how do I combine my top ability with the bottom ability, and in what proper sequence I can do to have more optimized engine as compared to my opponent. Because one or two turns can be very impactful for how beneficial you are going to get in the later turns. So you always have to think how to optimize these things. And since everyone is going to get a different playboard, so every time they have to think in a different way. You cannot just copy things. Then another bottom action is going to be to pay wood. So you will take wood from one of the hexes you control, pay it back to build any one of the structures. It can be the windmill, which increases your production, your armory, which increases your power, your monument, which increases your popularity, and mines, which can let you move around from mine to mine through underground tunnels very quickly across the board. So these structures are going to be important, and as soon as you have constructed all your buildings, you will complete one of your objectives as well. Then the last thing is going to be do an enlist action at the bottom. And what enlist action lets you do is that it lets you integrate your abilities with your people who are sitting on your left and right. You get to unlock one of these bottom abilities, and whenever any other player on your left and right gets to do that specific action, you get a special bonus as well. So it has a lot of player interaction by this mechanism. And in this way, I have given you a quick overview of all those actions that might be available on your board, even though not in depth, but it gives you a sense of that the top actions are mostly about moving across the board, doing production here, whereas the bottom row actions are more about getting upgrades, building things, or utilizing the resources that you have already collected. And this is the core essence of the game. You are trying to go across the board, trying to exploit different kind of regions. Each region is going to have a symbol which tells whether it's rich in oil, forestry, wood, iron, comes from mountains. So these regions you will be using from there. Uh, Now, there are going to be salient features on the map itself which are going to be important as well. First, what we discuss is the tunnels which let you go from one section to another tunnel very quickly. But other than that, there are going to be these lakes which you cannot cross by default. So you have to move around these lake parts unless your faction ability or upgrade does allow you to do that. Then there are going to be rivers which in the start are crucial to actually keep the factions limited to their area. But once you unlock the river walk ability by deploying one of your robots, only then the faction will be able to actually cross these rivers and start doing better abilities. Then there is this central section which is called the factory, and all the players are going to try and go up to that factory. The reason being that once you have gone to the factory, your main character for example goes to the factory, then you are going to unlock one of these factory cards. The number of cards will be dependent on number of players, but once you have unlocked and selected a card that you like, then this just adds an additional action on your player board, that what is the action that you can do in addition to what you have, and these are normally very powerful actions. So that's what factory is going to give you, in addition to being not only that but also being very powerful. At the end, whoever controls this factory area is going to get 3 additional hex points or control points. Then another thing on these faction boards is going to be on this player board is going to be these encounter points. So there are different villages in this area where you can reach, and some story type event is going to happen for which this deck is available. In this you will be picking up one of the cards and seeing that what happens. It adds flavor text, it has beautiful artwork representing what happened. Maybe you found a wounded soldier, maybe you found a village which is oppressed and they are offering you food to do something, and it will give you few options. Now this activity can be triggered, or encounter can be triggered only by your main character, because he's a human character. You cannot do it with your normal workers or your robots, but you are going to do them with your main character, and these are going to give you main options, and these options are going to be from easy to difficult decisions but more powerful. For example, you can oppress someone, which is going to drop your popularity, and but you will get a lot of reward for just stealing things from them, and things like that will be there. Or you can help them out, and that might be a weaker action, but it will give you something. So encounters are always good, and you can always decide based on each encounter that what reward I want to take. There is flavor text on it which makes it more thematic. Now let's go to the combat. Once your robot has landed on a space, or your character, so these plastic miniatures are the only ones who can do combat, not your wooden meeples, because wooden meeples just represent workers. If a plastic miniature comes on any wooden meeple, then they will just, your workers will just run away to their home base. So they never go into fight. But if such thing happens, the aggressor popularity does drop. People don't like aggressors. Well, unless it's a combat. So let's take example of this one, that once you go in combat, first thing that will be checked is that once the combat is initiated, two different factions are on the same space. The combat enabled characters are on the same space. Then you will see that how many characters are there. Let's say there were two defensive characters of the blue faction and only one of the white faction. Then that represents that how many number of these combat cards you can play. Each character is going to have some in the start, plus they can earn more later during the game. So the blue faction is allowed to play two combat cards, whereas from a handful of cards that the player will have, the white faction will be able to select one which he wants to play. The combat, how it will occur is based upon the power as well, because as I said that the power represents your army, which is your permanent thing, whereas these combat cards are going to tell how much valor or how much energy they put into it. So this is only a temporary resource, whereas your army is a permanent resource. For combat, these dials are going to be used, where you're going to select what's the power that you want to, power means your army you want to deploy in this fight along with your character, and this character is going to let me select a certain amount of power. I will in secret select this, and then both the players are going to reveal, and whoever has the highest total is going to win the hex or control of that, and the other player is going to move back, whoever was the loser. Some of the important things that you can do in this mechanism is that there is going to be, you can play your combat card face down as well in hidden, which means you were not willing to spend that card, and that comes back to your hand. Because if you think you're going to lose and the other player is going to win anyway, then why waste a card? Why waste your power? You can always bluff and put the card like this, so that the other still thinks you're using a combat card, but maybe he lost a lot of power, whereas you saved your power and just took a hit. Okay, I'm taking a hit, I will lose the battle, but at least I didn't lose the power, because achieving maximum power is also one of your objectives that you can do in the game. So that's all the components in the game which I have explained. Every faction starts from there, starts coming in, and there is going to be always conflict, always thinking. The players will be face to face with each other, but they will not try to combat with each other. And that's what you have to understand, that this is a game about not combat, because there are going to be certain losses whenever you do combat. So you don't want to do combat intentionally, but sometimes you may have to do them. Sometimes just to complete an objective, you will do those combats. And the combat mechanism is fine as well, even though some people might like to have more. And that's all there is in Scythe. Now, coming to the things that will excite you. The game board is beautiful, and once you have populated all of this wooden things that are here back on the board, you will be slowly increasing your workers across the board. You will be controlling hexes, and once it looks very beautiful, once your robots are deployed, your buildings are across your path, you will get a really nice feeling. You really want a good engine going through, heavy production ongoing, with resources being put on the grid. But you also have to be prepared for losses as well, because if you lose a hex with a lot of resources, then the other player is going to become the owner of the resources that you had collected on that hex, because you never collect resources back on your board. So that's also always an enticing thing that will attract people to attack you, which I think is good, because I do want more combat in this game, because even though detrimental, but it is something that excites people. So the game is really exciting, even though initially everyone will be working on their engine, setting up their economy, getting resources built, getting some upgrades. But then when it comes time to expand across Europa, then you are going to face problems. You will be having decisions. Should I come and attack them? I will be losing my popularity. I will be losing my power. Can I do it right now, or should I wait for a better time? And those kind of decisions are going to be always good. The thinkiness of, okay, how to match up my combinations to be more resourceful, that's always going to be very thinky on your in your head, and you are always going to have some crunchy decisions to take on deciding what to do. Now, once the game ends, then comes the work of this popularity. Why popularity is important, which is tracked on this side of the board. Popularity is important because based on the amount of popular you are, you're going to get rewards, a different tier of rewards, which are represented by these three big hexes, rectangles. That these are the rewards that you're going to get. So if let's say white was in this range based on its popularity and blue was here, so for each of the objectives the white has completed, he's going to get 5 victory points, whereas the blue is only going to get 4 victory points. Your coins directly convert into victory points as well. The number of hexes or area of Europa you control become victory points. The number of resources in your control become victory points. And in all the games there are going to be certain building structure objectives, that where do you have to build buildings next to lakes, next to encounters, maybe adjacent to mines, whatever the case may be. These will be shifting in each game, which adds again variability to where you should be placing those buildings. And in this way the game has a lot of variability, lot of path to victory. And if you like that kind of variability in games, always thinkiness in games with a beautiful table presence, then Scythe is not going to disappoint you. Hopefully this has given you a quick overview of what is stored in this game, the cool combinations that await you, and a beautiful game to look at for you. That's it for me. Happy gaming.